Hello, Steve here, and we need to talk about a serious issue. It's a pandemic, far worse than COVID, that could end up causing major environmental problems, and it is, you guessed it, the Steve Jobs disease, which me and Louis Rossman are the only two people who are not infected by it. We're the only two people who think that we need to bring back user-upgradable parts and repairable parts to computers. I mean, Apple Silicon, no matter how fast it is, it's a piece of trash architecture. That's the worst thing that ever happened in the tech industry, because it sacrifices user upgradability and repairability and expandability. And take a look at this, dick who replied to my comment. I'm sorry if it's backwards, but all new chips are like that now. This person really thinks that we should get rid of user upgradability and replace it with something that's both slower and causes landfill to build up in the oceans. Really? This person's probably like a Trump supporter. That guy replied to my comment. Yes, I know the chips are like that, but you're forgetting what you liked 10 years ago about computers. You forgot a decade ago that computers were great. They were fast. They were upgradable, easily upgradable. I mean, I doubt this guy was alive in the 90s, unlike me, but when computers were the best. They were the best in the 1990s. So the only problem Apple had, which caused them to get the disaster Steve Jobs had, Steve Jobs did correct the marketing of Apple and got out the race and got rid of the racist people who ran Apple in the 1990s that prevented Apple from getting sales in the U.S. consumer market. And that's why Apple almost died in the 1990s. But Steve Jobs, they could have had somebody else fix the marketing just like Steve Jobs, but not sacrificed your features, which I'm actually going to say that Steve Jobs looks like a genius compared to Tim Cook, because Tim Cook has failed Apple and failed the computer industry by making everything worse. I know I've made a billion videos about this. Really, I have just under 700 videos, but you know what I mean? And they're not all about this. But I wanted to focus on something other than Andy Keto or Pine Power Lie, because this is worse than Andy Keto. This is our planet being destroyed by wasted computers that are not even a year old, being thrown out and not being biodegradable. These computers that don't have enough hard drive space and you can't upgrade it, so you just throw away the computer. And the same thing with the memory. Same thing with any broken parts, which are getting more and more delicate. It exponentially will increase the amount of destroyed computers and will weaken the wallets of people because they're spending money on new computers. They're going to start spending money on new computers in the 2030s every day because their computers break and are not repairable, and whenever they run out of storage. There might be one day where computers have 64 megabytes of storage in them. Flash storage, or something even slower than flash storage, something slower than the eMMC. I know I'm going off on a tangent here, but that's the way things are heading, according to what Apple's trying to do to both the Macs and PCs. And this guy who commented indicated it's for PCs too. That guy's forgetting about desktop processors made by Intel and AMD. Those are the real processors you should be using in your computers. And laptop versions of those should come with PGA sockets, not BGA. BGA should be illegal. Just like what me and Louis Rossman, the only two people standing without this disease, have thoughts about. And get ready for some competition, Apple. Your Halloween event is going to be encompassed by my event weeks later, where I'm going to reveal user upgradable computers, including laptops that are much thicker, much more durable, much less hot, much more expandable, and actually completely expandable. And don't overheat under high power, and are much easier to repair. I mean, you could have hired somebody else to run Apple, and would have gotten rid of the marketing problem and then improved the Apple computers instead of gotten worse at them. You could have still done the blue and white plastic in the iMac G3, but made it more square and can fit an ATX motherboard in there with all the upgradability. But no, the iMac G3 is way better than the computers of today, adjusted for time and technology increase in power. But we need to do something, because the way things are exponentially going with, like, computers getting worse and worse, we're going to see a landfill of 3 miles high by 2050, encompassing the whole world. That's what's going to happen if we don't stop it with these BGA sockets, unupgradable memory and storage, and unrepairable computers. One day we might not have computers anymore, and we won't have anything to replace them. I mean, you saw how the optical drive didn't get a proper replacement. All we got were streaming services, which doesn't count as optical media. We should have had 3.5-inch flash discs, or 2.5-inch, to make them more compact. I know we have SD cards, but people aren't utilizing them the same way as they're utilizing optical media. And many devices don't even have them. So yeah, you could say that SD cards are a replacement for optical drives. But they're just too small. They're too small to handle using. They're too hard to grab because they're so small. Your cat or dog could eat them. Those SD cards. It's just, why are people thinking like this in the computer industry? They're getting these thoughts that they're being tricked into liking this stuff. Well, I can understand them liking the performance, but they're getting tricked into liking the fact that you need to replace computers more frequently or spend more money on computers because your computer doesn't have enough storage. Like my MacBook Air. That computer I showed you the comment on, it's an Intel iMac, and I have it for a reason, because it's upgradable. Sure, it's hard to get into, finicky to get into, but at least it's what I got. I'm probably going to replace it with a 2019 Mac Pro in the future, once those go down in price. Sure, that doesn't have an optical drive either. It doesn't have any hard drive bays, but has the PCI slots, PCI Express slots for all that expansion, and 12 memory slots, and a socketed CPU that goes up to 28 cores. And what does the Mac Pro currently have? 24 cores, and not all of them are big. Only 66% of them are big cores. And even the big cores are much smaller than any Intel core is, other than Atom-based. Other than the E-cores in the current architectures. So, why are people being tricked into liking this? Well, it's the same intention people got tricked into liking communism in Soviet Russia and other communist countries. Just like Louis Rossmann quoted. And I think that's smart for him to quote like that. The same way that both he and I in high school have seen a boy who's not that attractive, kind of average, but he carries home a new girlfriend every week. Or starts dating a new girl every week. And what do they think about him that's so pretty? Why? This guy AM from my high school, why do they think he's so attractive and they want to date him when he breaks up with them after 1 week, and they didn't want to date me, and I was even more attractive. I'm not trying to be self-centered, but there were way more boys in that school than him. Same with Louis Rossmann in his high school, where that's in the same high school his teacher taught him about Soviet Russia and how it's like Apple. Or what Apple was going to be, because Apple wasn't like that yet. But Louis Rossmann is put out of his business because of Apple. refusing to sell these parts. Of course, I'm not going to encourage this, but Louis Rossmann has every right to steal those parts from Apple to fix his computers because they refuse to sell them to him. Why don't they want his money? Same way AMD. Why don't you want people's money for all the processors that are desktop socketed that are sold only to the OEMs? Why don't you want their money? You're just losing money there. Same for you, Apple, with well, not Apple, because Apple repairs them themselves and makes it them only. But why are people buying into this type of Apple? Why do they like it? And lastly, Apple Silicon is slow. It's slow as crap. The M1 processor, it runs at 600 megahertz, and people think it's 3.2. 3.2 is the turbo clock. 600 megahertz is the base clock, and it's the base clock that matters, because if the turbo clock is much higher, it'll draw a lot more power. You've seen those M1 Pro, M1 Max, M1 Ultra computers get so freaking hot into the higher than the boiling point of water. You've seen that. And yet they're not that fast. ARM processors are meant for MP3 players, smartphones, and low-end tablets at the most, but not desktops, laptops, and high-end tablets. That's all I gotta say. And screw all you people who have gotten diseased by Apple. You contracted a virus far worse than COVID, far more contagious than COVID.